Okay. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the opening meeting law, General Laws C-30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Easthampton Telecom Advisory Committee is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen or view this meeting while in progress may do so, by specified remote access instructions. Oh, God. Okay, or we will post a record of this meeting on the website as soon as we are able. In your other meetings, Tom, did everybody say this?
Yep.
Yeah, good.
Oh, okay.
No to Mr. Peak and yes to Mr. Malsbury. Yeah, this was news to me, but great. Okay.
I did in the public hearings. I don't recall if I did it in our general meetings.
Okay. So thanks, guys, for coming. I guess this is our call to order. We don't have anyone from the public attending remotely. We are down a few people, but we still have a quorum. Not that we have anything particularly that we need to vote on. But first of all, how are you guys doing? This is kind of a weird time with everything that's going on right now. It feels really weird to be talking about this particular thing.
Yeah. Well, doing all right, all things considered, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. So, looking at the, did anybody see the email that I sent? I only sent it like an hour ago.
Yeah, I didn't have time to read the attachment.
Yeah, I figured that. Did any of you guys have anything to add to the report recently?
I did my 2 sections, so.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
I'm afraid to say that I didn't get to mine. I'm sorry for that. I know I had 2 months, so I really have no excuse, but I thought I'd be able to get to it towards the end of this, and then the budget process kind of heated up and it just got away from me. I will have it, obviously, for the next one, but my apologies there.
Okay.
Tom, I think you have plenty of excuses.
Well,
in this situation.
I don't think any of them are good ones.
Yeah. I'm in the same boat. I have made some updates, but they're not in any kind of position to present. So it's kind of a scrapbook at this point. So I need a little bit more, at least another couple weeks in order to get it together.
Okay.
It's going to be hard to do an official report anyway until we can actually work together. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if we can just get as much of it, if we can pull together just a first draft, like this, then at least we have something to talk about once we can get back in the room.
Yeah.
Who knows whenever that is? So.
Yeah. I know. I was thinking about it too. I'm like, what if let's say we had this thing finished right now? Is this even the appropriate time to present something like this? Like, is this what people are interested in hearing about?
Well,
maybe.
Yes and no, right? I mean, like, obviously the fiscal situation right now with every municipality is crazy because, just everything that's going on and the uncertainty about revenue and whatnot. And then on the flip side, we're using home internet more than ever before. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, I've got a person in my organization who's a senior manager, who we just happened to learn has DSL. And it just apparently is just not really a computer person when she's not at work. Mm-hmm. And so she cannot upload. I'm not even talking about huge just like big Word files. Like I wrote like a 50-page report in Word. It's got a bunch of embedded charts and tables and whatnot. And it's too big. Like she downloaded it to make edits, and then like it wouldn't let her upload it because it's too big on her DSL. I think there's some other tech issue going on there, but like, you know, this is like a reality for a lot of people right now, is trying to figure out what this actually is going to be like. So, you know, I guess, yeah, it's sort of weird because, yeah, but yes and no.
Yeah, fair enough. Hey, Dan, good to see you.
Hi.
Yeah. So I think it's good that we should move forward with the report and get something done and just have it on the table so that when the city's ready to address it, there it is, because obviously there's a lot of other balls in the air right now. So
I think this is very relevant too. I mean, for the reasons Tom mentioned, I don't think it's been made irrelevant by what's going on. And I would guess that a lot of people in Easthampton would still be in support of it.
And another thing that I would just say is that one thing that I've learned in my short time in city government is that a lot of the time with things in the city, it starts as an idea, and then there's years where it's like, well, maybe that would be cool, and then suddenly there's a funding source, or there's an opportunity somehow, and like the people did like work. You know, sometimes it's not always immediately clear when that work's going to come to fruition. But, you know, I mean, you could just look at so many things in the city, so many cool little features or recent development projects. A lot of those things, somebody started talking about that like a long time ago and really explored, like did the kind of stuff that we're doing right now to make it what someone would call like shovel ready, right? To make it so that like when the time comes where there's a narrow window where there's an actual opportunity to do a thing, like the big questions, how would we do this? What would it look like? Would we want to, like, we've already had those. We don't have to spend a couple of years talking about it, and in the meantime, the window to figure it out closes. So I think that this is a really important thing, even if it's, you know, kind of crazy to be talking about this sort of long term. I mean, it's just strange when the world is in so much chaos to be talking about such a like wonky idea. But I think this is a good thing that we're doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, thanks. Yeah, I was looking at some of the news. They were talking about, you know, different spending projects that they might do to try, especially if we have a real bad recession, and obviously infrastructure is huge. And I was thinking, like, man, we could really time this up right and have one of those projects that is ready to go, and we get a big, you know, chunk of money because we did all this work, you know, and be able to really.
good point.
Yeah.
I also think that the situation with the pandemic and the fact that a lot of companies are figuring out that they don't need office, and they can have their workers, just like Tom does, connect and work over the internet. It's going to become much more critical that we have strong internet throughout the community.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I do think that there's not to just pontificate about this too much, but like I do think that there's the reality. You know, I worked from home one day a week, and no one cared about that. I haven't gone into the office since mid-March, right? And like you know, they're now saying that I might not be going until September to December, and like if you can actually continue to be functional for that long, like it's whatever for me. But like if you're somebody who's being productive and functional, and you're say in Boston and you have a young family, right? And you get to a point where you say, I kind of don't want to be in Boston anymore. It's expensive, and it's not really what I'm looking for lifestyle wise. It's going to be increasingly hard for employers to say no to the idea of you working from home after it's been demonstrated that you can do it for an extended period of time. So I do think that we're going to see more and more people who are telecommuters coming in. I do think that that's going to be essential in the Pioneer Valley, which doesn't have a lot like a strong jobs market and doesn't really have the prospect of having a strong jobs market anytime soon. I think that remote work is going to be an important part of that. And I think that being prepared to sort of like be receptive to that is going to be an important part of economic development. So, it's something we start thinking about. Well, it's something we've been thinking about now for almost 2 years.
Yeah, well, yeah, that kind of does tie into part of what actually I had in my section, and I wanted to ask you guys for some input on this. So I'm going to share this screen. Oh, no, it's disabled.
I have it up in my email here.
Okay. Well, basically, so one of the things that we had talked about was fiberhoods as improvement districts. And I was trying to remember exactly what we talked about with regard to improvement districts. And what I kind of said is, I know there's the idea that we would divide our city into sections and then be able to, roll out a network, based on the demand that we see from different sections. But also the idea that we can use kind of the appeal of having fiber available to improve different parts of our city that maybe we want to make more desirable to homeowners and business owners.
Hey, Paul, just so you know, I think I just set it up so that you can share the screen.
Okay.
I realize the settings were configured that way, but you should be able to do it now.
Okay. Well, we'll look at it, but that's basically the idea. Well, I'll show you guys what I wrote. Screen.
I don't know if this is relevant to what you're talking about, but I think I remember from the Matrix presentation that they were talking about fiberhood improvement districts can also be set up in Massachusetts so that only the people in that district are paying a tax if it is taxpayer funded. So instead of the whole town having a tax increase, it's only that neighborhood.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that's the way that improvement districts, in my understanding, I don't think I haven't done work with them since I
That makes sense.
got here, but I think that the way that they usually work is like if there's a neighborhood that wants to put in, I don't know, like a sewer system or whatever, that doesn't actually stand to benefit anyone else, but they got to finance it somehow. It's like you can set up. It's sort of like what we're doing with the school, where you have like like an exemption, so that you can bond for something and then pay it down with taxpayer money.
Yeah.
But the difference is that it is the difference is that it's like only a specific set of addresses end up paying for it.
How would that process be initiated? Through the local city councilor, or would a group form to pursue this?
That's a great idea. I actually have no idea.
Yeah.
I assume that there has to be a vote, right? There has to be. But I've, like I said, I don't even know if we really have any around here. Like if we do, they precede my time on the council. So
I was actually part, now you really rung a bell when you said that, but I was part of, on the EDIC, we had worked on getting the One Ferry location a special zoning, and we went and worked with the zoning board to create an improvement district there, because we had to take out money to do some of the infrastructure on the road to make that project happen.
That was a different thing. That was an improvement district. That was a tax improvement financing, where what you do,
Yes, a TIF.
yeah, TIF,
Westfield.
where what you do is you basically say that you use some money to do something that facilitates new development, and then some of the taxes on that new development that wouldn't have otherwise existed goes to pay down the financing. And then it's a whole thing.
That was a little different. All right.
There's so many weird little mechanisms, but yeah, it's there's ways that It's something that maybe is worth looking into, but I wish I had better answers for you off the top of my head. I've just never really touched that stuff yet.
Yeah. Well, like I said, there's a lot of little things. So I'm going to share this.
Yeah.
Did that share?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Oh, great. Awesome. So,
Now you're gonna put my glasses on.
I'll zoom in for you.
Okay.
So, we could go through all the report. I mean, I think this is the only thing that we have any new was for section 8 here.
Let's start with that, and then we can talk about anyone else's stuff.
All right.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So there are several methods. Should I just read it out loud? I mean, we all can read.
Yeah,
Sure.
that works.
There are several methods our municipality could explore to obtain funding with the intention of establishing a public broadband utility. Funding sources for an initial build-out could include revenue drawn from a property tax increase, free cash on hand, or through bonding. Settling on a financial business model will allow the city to forecast and budget its network build activities, which will provide us with critical information needed to evaluate the true viability of the project.
There's one thing to add there, which is the public-private partnership is another funding where the private company provides a bunch of funding.
Yes, that's true.
Yep.
So how could I phrase this? Free cash on hand through a public private ship or through funding. Right. Make sense?
Yep.
I knew I was missing something. Once a broadband network is established, the municipality will draw further recurring revenue from ratepayers who register for the service. Subscription models traditionally show enhanced profitability when bundling services together, such as voice over IP and business level support. Cities may also be divided into sections and built out over time, spreading the financial costs over several years and substantially reducing the need for borrowed capital as revenue is earned.
I like that, the last paragraph, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. You might want to add in additionally that some of that revenue would go to a private partner if it was a private partner, public-private partnership.
I mean, that's true. I know that there's going to be some overlap. We do have a section for business and operational models that will probably flesh it out, but it could be good to mention there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like any utility, a municipal broadband network is expected to draw an income sufficient enough to meet the payment obligations stemming from the initial build-out, while also covering the expense of continued operations, maintenance, and the further improvement of the network. Revenue in excess of typical operational costs may be used to fund additional infrastructure, growing the footprint organically as profit is reinvested. The scale and pace of growth may be adjusted according to market conditions and achieved subscription rates.
That's pretty good.
Okay.
You may want to add in that some of the ways that money can be used otherwise. For example, sponsoring events or, didn't some of the other MLPs talk about that, or we talked about the fact that they might sponsor things, or or that we might be able to provide funding to local media, stuff like that.
When we did the tour of the various people in the area, some expressed interest in that, but mostly it was kind of hands off. Westfield was putting the money back into the business and didn't really want to be doing things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing we haven't mentioned is where the money might go, like a general fund. We've talked about that. If business is ever profitable.
Right.
Yeah.
So actually, that might be because I think that is one thing. It sounds like a lot of the MLPs really bristle at the idea. Like some of them set up, if I'm remembering this correctly, and somebody correct me if I'm not. Some of them have like a pilot program with the city where they agree to pay some share of their revenue to the city in lieu of taxes because they're because they don't, because it's a it's a nonprofit effectively. So some of them do like willingly say we're going to share a certain amount of our revenue with the city. What they did sort of bristle at was the idea of, they said that, and I've read this in a lot of places, that there's a lot of anxiety among MLPs about like too much excess revenue going just to the city, because they seem to feel that often leads to situations where they don't actually have the reserves they need to make like repairs and capital improvements that often come up, which, you know, in a lot of ways that actually sounds like the situation that we have with our sort of water and sewer, where, you know, it's part of the city, but the revenue that gets generated by the water and sewer is supposed to be used to finance, you know, water and sewer. And so, you know, I think that there's a sense that if not like a law, there is like a best practice about that revenue not being seen as just like free money for the city, as much as I would love free money for the city.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think the water and sewer is something people will point to and be like, hey, look at that. That's supposed to be self-supporting, and now it's costing us money. You know, and so definitely we should be very careful as we're involved in this process about how this really gets arranged and organized, and make sure that this is a long-term, you know, successful venture. But I also think some of that conversation is kind of we have to hit a certain point before we're bringing in so much profit that, you know, we're not going to be reinvesting it anymore. I mean, presumably we have to pay off an original loan of whatever type,
Right.
and we want to fund, you know, further build out. So
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be an issue early in the process of building the thing out. That might be something that the city government needs to determine later on when we're actually approaching being in the black. So,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And whoever is elected or appointed to the MLP board, I mean, that'll ultimately be their decision.
Yeah,
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. We'll put Tom Melsbury on it. It would be great.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can go ahead and put these things in this because it's a draft, speaking of the report, and then as part of the final edit process, you know, if we see redundant things, we obviously can, you know, clean this up and come up with something to hand the city. So
Sure.
it's good to talk through it.
Hey, I didn't even see it. Jim Zarvis is here and has his hand raised. Jim Zarvis.
Oh,
There he is. Down at the
Hi.
bottom.
Sorry about that. I wanted to wait and be patient. Listen, who's the chair?
that would be me. Hello, Jim.
Paul, hi. I'm representing Harry tonight. He asked me to step in from the planning board. I'm sorry, I'm just a little bit late. I had some technical issues, and I just wanted to say hi and make my presence known. Now, I hope you don't mind that I just jump in, and I'm watching this document here, and I had a question pop into my mind just right off the bat. And hello to everyone else. Some of you I know.
Hi.
Is that Stan at the bottom I see there?
Yes, it is.
Good to see you, Stan. So Stan's been through this sort of thing with me many times in terms of writing manuals and things as we worked in Easthampton Media together. And this document that you're writing, real quick, is this just for the build out, or is this sort of for the life of the organization that you're building?
So what we're working on, well, kind of our role as a committee is to be it's an advisory role, and we are kind of basically we're collecting information, and we're compiling it now into a final report, the things that we've looked at for the past few years. It will inform the project going forward, but it's not a set in stone. You know, like we don't have real power to be like, this is exactly what we're going to do. You know, we're basically say, these are things that we've seen, these are things that didn't work, these are things that did, and these are ideas that we think make sense for Easthampton.
Great answer, and it sounds perfect. This committee's doing a wonderful job. Harry was right. 8.2, at the end of that, maybe the sentence before the end, I couldn't help but wonder about some other things that seem to be left out there. And I noticed that in my experience, paragraphs like that can be a little restrictive. Now, I know they're going to take it and do other things later, but there's things like the salaries of the people that are working for, you know, the administration that are running it that aren't included in that paragraph. I think you maybe want to be a little bit cautious about trying to restrict it too much and leave it open enough things that you didn't think of.
That's true. I kind of thought like continued operations was the word that I chose to kind of be like that kind of involves everything, but that is not very clear. So that is a good point. It's a fair statement. Find a way to fit that in. Thank you for hopping on the call. Did you have any other input? So far?
No, I'm just jumping in now raw. I'm going to try and stay out of it as much as possible. Love you guys. Keep it up.
All right. So, all right. Are you good with 8.2? Other than that, all right. I know it's a little bare. So for bonding, there are two types of bonds we have seen used to fund municipal broadband infrastructures. General obligation bonds are sometimes used. This type of financing is more common in areas with very low population density and is often combined with state and federal aid. Easthampton does not currently qualify for this type of aid as it is intended for rural areas which may not have access to broadband currently.
That's all true to my understanding.
Okay. We have seen cities like Easthampton and larger who have used revenue bonds to fund similar projects. Revenue bonds are loans repaid with money generated from an infrastructure project. For example, a city might use a revenue bond to pay for a new bridge and repay that bond by charging a toll to use that bridge. Most revenue bonds are 30-year loans with no penalty for early repayment. It is important to note that although revenue bonds are intended to be repaid with revenue earned, the city will still be responsible for the terms of the loan should the project fail to generate the capital needed for repayment. As they are not guaranteed by a property tax increase or debt override, revenue bonds typically have a slightly higher interest payment than general obligation bonds. However, interest rates for each type of bonding will depend on the credit rating of the city at the time of application and may fluctuate over time. That seem fair and thorough?
Sure.
Yep.
One question. The word capital, would it be better to use revenue over there rather than capital?
Revenue is kind of the appropriate word. I was worried about using it so many times in the same paragraph.
Yes,
Okay.
there's a few of them in there.
Yeah.
But I think it's right. Capital kind of means a different thing in this.
Okay. All right. Let's change that. Maybe
I also don't know, you're capitalizing the word city a few times. I don't know if that's...
yeah.
We tend to do that. I
Tend to
think,
do that.
just talk about using the city.
Okay. Because it's referring to a specific city. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see in the next paragraph I have it capitalized and not capitalized. So
Well, let's
the first draft.
stuff like that. We can just when this is done, we can sort of globally look this over for little stylistic things.
We can do the whole report in all caps.
Nice.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Just to let people know how excited we are about it.
We mean this. That's right.
All right.
Does it make sense to, I don't know if this or sources of funding would be the right spot for this, but to speculate a little bit about the fact that, I don't know, kind of what we talked about earlier about possible additional federal or state aid for infrastructure projects because of, an economic recession, depression, because new administrations coming in. That's stuff to consider. To say, there's candidates out there who have made promises about funding this, and were they to be running the executive branch of the government, that might happen. I think that's important info.
I was gonna say, I think that is important to know. I'm not sure if we should put it here as like, this is an option that we see.
Probably not in bonding, but maybe in 8.1.
Well, how about right now in 8.3 we have it saying Easthampton does not currently qualify for this type of aid, yada yada yada. We could put something like, however, some politicians have expressed interest in funding the further rollout of high-speed internet, so opportunities for state or federal aid might emerge in the future.
I guess it's important information to put, but it's also, I wouldn't want people to think, okay, we should do this and get this set up for the time that we get a whole bunch of federal money. And then if we don't have the federal money, have people say, well, we didn't get that, so we'll just keep this one on the back burner perpetually. It still might make sense, even if we didn't have federal aid, to do it.
Right. I mean, if you run the numbers and they work, then they work.
Right.
You know, but I mean, I also just think that it's something where, like, what I would like is for the city, when they receive this report, to be mindful as grant opportunities come over the next few years, of just like, you know, like, because it could be that this is something that people are interested in, but they'd be a lot more interested in if 30% of the cost was covered by a federal grant, you know? And so I just think that it might be worth just putting some language in to be like, right now we can't get the sort of help that the hill towns are getting, but that might change in the future. So keep your eyes on that.
Okay. Yeah, we'll squeeze that in. That's reasonable. Okay, so for a citywide tax increase, we have seen some municipalities implement property tax increases as a method of funding municipal broadband infrastructure. This seems to be a rare occurrence and would require the approval of a plurality of residents on a municipal ballot vote. Efforts to implement a debt override would likely face resistance from those in the community who feel it is unfair to compel the entire city to pay for the establishment of a utility for which only a portion of the city may want or need. Others may argue that such an arrangement would create an unfair competitive environment for those established service providers who do not have the benefit of public funding for their operations. It should be noted that outside providers do pay a small licensing fee to the municipality for the privilege of servicing our market. That makes sense, everybody? Citywide tax increase is likely to cause division within our community and would be difficult to implement. We have not found any community similar to us which has used this funding mechanism and would not recommend pursuing such an arrangement.
I can agree with that.
Yeah, that's good.
It also segues into the fiberhood conversation that we just had. You know, if certain areas of the city want to pursue this on their own. So,
I guess I might scale back some of the first paragraph, just because I don't want to really speculate how people are necessarily going to, you know, approach this politically. But at the same time, I also think it might be worth dropping in some language being like, this is what some communities have done. We did just bond for a really big school building, so, you know, it could be controversial. Like another big property tax funded capital project.
Perhaps get rid of the phrase "would likely."
I would likely.
Where is that? Would likely. May. I mean, these points here are things that we did hear from people, you know, partly through the survey and partly through our social media outreach, where these are kind of the two arguments. People are saying they're going to raise our taxes to pay for this, you know.
All right, so then let's say that. Like, if we say, hey, in the survey that we conducted, we found that some respondents were concerned about, you know, these things, then that's something that we actually have data on. So let's talk about the data.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I felt a little weird about the paragraph too, so I'm glad that you pointed that out, because I wasn't sure how it would. I mean, I wrote it, but you know, it is a weird thing to project what people will say and be like, "This is why they'll be angry," but we know it's true. Any other comments on this section? Okay. So fiber hoods as improvement districts. We talked about this a little earlier. Fiber optic technology availability is desirable to businesses and homeowners and can be useful in attracting new development and investment to our city. A typical plan for building a broadband network would be to divide the city into neighborhoods or fiber hoods and provide a platform for residents to request the availability of the service. This method allows the city to plan for growth in the areas with the most demand and profitability first, while encouraging residents to communicate with each other the benefits of a fiber utility in hopes that their neighbors will join them in requesting the service. Key areas for economic development may be prioritized by the city as well, particularly business districts, high population density areas, or new developments.
That's first sentence is kind of clumsy. I would probably say the availability of fiber optic technology rather than you threw like 4 big words.
Yeah, okay.
You kind of trip over the first sentence. There we go. Even fiber optics would be fine, probably. Yeah, but that's good. Yep.
My one thing here is before we, I like a lot of this, but before we say too much about it, I think we need to go back and take a look at improvement districts, because my understanding of an improvement district is that it's basically a tax increase, like the one in paragraph 8.4, except for that you're voting on it on a neighborhood by neighborhood level, so that it's only affecting, so if we said, for example, just to say, let's start as a pilot and do Cottage and Union. And let's so that all those businesses have access to high-speed internet and the apartments above them, and then let's build it out from there. You could potentially go to the building owners, and to the people who live there, and you could set it up as an improvement district where the building owners then pay higher property taxes to finance the build out of this thing that would then be attractive to their tenants. But it is where my understanding of improvement districts in Massachusetts is that they are a method of using taxes to finance revenue, and would likely run into many of the same challenges as we would see in a citywide vote, with the one exception being that the only people who'd be paying for it would be the people who, in the short run right after that, are actually getting the services. So if it took longer to build out into, like the Loudville area, for example, then they wouldn't be paying for a service they're not receiving in the meantime. So that might make it a little bit more attractive, but it still is a tax increase to pay for this.
Right. If you look at recent history around here, business improvement districts have kind of, they've passed their peak, shall we say. Westfield got rid of theirs. I think Northampton's gone through some changes. So I think we want to be careful about, using that word improvement districts. It's kind of loaded.
Yeah,
maybe
I think in this section, we're kind of conflating like an operational rollout strategy with a funding mechanism. Mm-hmm. Like the way I understood fiber hoods was it was a way to designate high demand, so you'd have a successful rollout with high adoption, which would then provide its own funding. I had never understood it, or in our discussions, is to be like an improvement district that would be conflated with regional local tax on that area. I just thought it was more of an operational rollout strategy that would promote a successful startup.
Good point.
I don't disagree that it may be a possibility, but I think fiber hoods are a rollout strategy, and then improvement districts could be a financial option. And to person that you couldn't have a fiber hood without having an improvement district, I don't think is applicable to what we had seen in a larger scale.
Agreed.
That makes sense to me as well. I mean, this whole paragraph could go into rollout strategies in section 7.
Well, I mean, I'm writing rollout strategies.
Well, I know. I'm just.
I know. So I guess my point is that when I do that, I was planning to spend a lot of time on the concept of fiber hoods, but not on the concept of improvement districts, which to me, I was only really exposed to that idea when the Matrix 1 guy came in, because he was very excited. He was, I mean, they were basically suggesting that because they've basically been working mostly in rural areas where that's what people do, is you say, this is a utility we want, we're going to literally raise our property taxes to pay for this utility for everyone to have it. And that's really the only way to do it in a lot of those places, because they don't have the density for this to really be a self-sustaining thing. If you're in a place like that, then doing these as improvement districts makes a ton of sense. But if I just think that there's something we just need. Maybe we need to revisit this section after maybe doing a little bit more research into what exactly, how exactly improvement districts work in Massachusetts, and how they would even play into this, if at all.
Yeah.
I agree, Tom. And I think even if you wanted to keep this section here, if you maybe even just change the title of it to Improvement Districts by Fiber Hoods, that may make it a little more sense to me, at least for some reason. But I don't think we should, tie the term fiber hoods to a funding mechanism, because I think of it's more, like I was saying, a rollout success strategy. But that, if we do have fiber hoods, this may be something that we could utilize to fund, instead of just having seed capital to do the first fiber hood and have the first fiber hood pay for the second fiber hood, to have them seek their own funding and apply to be part of the MLP or something.
Right.
To be in the queue of the MLP's rollout.
I mean, so I know that in one of the rural communities, I want to say it was Otis, that set something like this up. They basically, when they pitched the fiber setup to people, what they basically said is, we're going to do just basically a general obligation bond for this thing. And then any revenue that we get is going to go to paying down that bond. So he's like, so if everyone in the city signs up for this, then your taxes aren't actually going to go up. But if we get it and we build it out and no one signs up for it, then it'll end like that the cost of that build out will be covered by tax increases. And doing that is at least it eliminates the chance that this. I'm not advocating or not advocating for that, but doing that might actually look really good to bond issuers, because you can say that, oh well, this whole project actually is going to be covered by like one way or another you're getting your money. I don't know if that's something that people would ever go for or whatever, but it's just something to think about. That's, I think, the context in which if we wanted to use improvement districts in the shape of fiber hoods, that would be the way that you do it. Is you'd say, okay, people are going to vote for this, and then we're going to do this, and if it pays for itself, then nothing ever happens. But otherwise, like the cost will be guaranteed by a bond that can be paid for by property taxes or something like that.
I mean, doing it in that way would give us a better interest rate, presumably on the bonding, and it would make
presumably you could save a lot of money. It also means that you have to pitch it to the voters, and they may or may not actually be interested. But and there, a lot of the arguments that you heard about, that you described in the section before. So, well, I don't even want this because I just bundle with Charter for my cable internet, which is fine by me. So why should my taxes maybe have to go up? Mm-hmm. I think that there's a whole discussion to be had there. But I agree with Tom that, like, end of the day, we could use fiber hoods as a rollout strategy and not even touch the concept of improvement districts.
Yeah, no, I agree. Not gonna lie, when I got to this section, I'm like, geez, how am I gonna write about this for financial options? But since we talked more about improvement districts functionally and what they might be under Mass state laws, it does make more sense that it's an option. It may not be the most appealing option, but it might be something worth including because it's theoretically possible we could do it.
Sure, and I don't want to like take any tools or options like off the table. But I just, to understand the context in which these things have happened.
Right. All right. So that's going to probably be totally rewritten, but that's cool. All right. So let's go on to 8.6. For a pro forma business plan, it is not possible to forecast a budget for network build activities before we have settled on a pro forma business plan. This will require a market study and full pulse survey to establish and communicate the conditions on the ground. This information will allow us to have more detailed conversations with potential partners and will help inform the discussion as we move towards settling on the business model which makes the most sense for our community. Once this information is available, we will have a better picture of the true viability of such an investment.
That's good. I would end with a sentence that says, it is the recommendation of this committee to create a pro forma business plan, right? I think that's the next step.
Right. I mean, you might even want to say it's a recommendation to this committee that funds be made available, funds and staff be made available for the creation of a pro forma business plan, something like that.
Just as a formality, do we want to bury recommendations in the body, or do we want to keep them all to one section?
We do have section 13 for conclusions and recommendations.
Okay, yeah.
But multiple places are a good idea too. I mean, like Tom says.
As long as we keep them all consistent.
Consistent, yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
We don't want to recommend it and then be like, and also we don't recommend it.
Well, I just mean language-wise. I mean, is it better to work them all out in section 13 and then reverse engineer them back into the sections that they're applicable to?
I think this is a good place to mention this. And again, this is a draft, so.
Yeah. No, just thinking out loud.
But it's a good point. Absolutely.
So he takes steps to obtain this information. We'll play with it.
Well, now we lost the part about funding.
Yeah, I think Tom said something that make recommendations.
Yeah, the city commit to funding, and then somebody else said personnel or, people.
Yeah. How would you guys phrase this?
All right, the city
commit, funding, or that's.
Yeah, the city make funding and staff available.
Yeah, that works.
To create a pro forma business plan.
Yeah, to explore. Yeah, to explore it. Yeah.
I'll be right back. I have to go get my AC adapter.
That work to explore the creation of a pro forma business plan?
Yeah, it gets the thought across, and we can clean up the grammar later. So.
Yeah. Okay. So that's not bad. That's all I got for this section.
This is good.
Oh, there's some good feedback. Thank you, guys. So I guess we can go through and look at what we have so far by section in the report. We don't have in a summary yet. We still have the history and mission. I didn't edit any of that, but.
No, I think that still needs to be cleaned up a little bit, but.
Yeah, it's pretty solid.
Yep.
Background information. Section. So this was about the different broadband technologies.
Right.
Dan, was this your section that you were working on? Oh, you're muted.
I lost Dan again. Who did section 2?
I can't see, I think. Is it background?
You can't see?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, you worked on this section, right? Were we going to talk about the 5G cellular data? What is this background? Yeah. Okay. So we still need to flesh this out a little bit.
Oh, yeah. I have a lot more.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Jason is supposed to do market landscape, but we don't have much there yet. Kevin, you did great with field visits.
This came out pretty good.
Yeah, it really did. It really did. It's thorough. It really sums all the visits up really well.
And it helps members who have joined us along the way, but the full history of the committee here.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
Hey, one little note. It looks like the ampersands are some little glitch.
Yeah.
ampersand.
They're going to have to replace all those guys.
Well, no, because you got that said G and E.
Oh, G.
I'm like, what
Yeah.
ampersands is he talking about? Yep.
Yep. G
All
and ampersand E.
Beware of special characters.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll edit all those out, of course.
Absolutely. I was writing in shorthand.
Yeah. Okay. So Tom, you're going to work on the rollout strategies. We already have business and operations models.
Yes.
Partners, public-private partnership. Yeah, so that's good. You're going to work on those. We just went over section 8. Additional services. We want to talk about things we could offer, television and streaming, all this stuff. I don't think anybody has signed up to take this one. Are there any volunteers?
Oh.
How about that new guy, James?
He's really into it.
I'm just representing Harry. So if I accept, I'm really accepting on behalf of Harry, which I'd love to do.
Harry will be glad to hear that.
But I don't think I should do that.
I mean, I'd be willing to take a stab at it, but just given how I've not been super consistent on here, I don't want to commit to picking up anything else until I've finished 7.
Gotcha. Maybe I'll take a stab at it for the next meeting.
Okay, cool.
It's not going to be a very in-depth section anyway. User profile. I'll tell you, this is one I have no interest in writing myself if I don't have to. So
Well, that's stuff from the survey, right?
From the survey, right.
yeah.
So again, I helped Jason with the survey, so if he gets bogged down with his section and, family matters, shall we say, then I can step in and help on this guy.
Okay. Jason / Kevin in a pinch.
Great.
Okay. The benefits. This is not such a bad section. It's really the best section. I don't know if we've divvied this up.
I think these last 3 sections are really things we're going to have to hash out together once the rest of the report is getting close to final form, especially the recommendations. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we should have sort of just a chat about those next time, and at that point we can, at that point hopefully a few of us will have will not have a task, so we can pick those up.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I don't think we have to divvy those out right now.
But I'd sort of like to have all this writing done by August.
I think it's
I
reasonable.
would hope, yeah.
Have another meeting where we go over the stuff, and then, benefits, risks. This is all sort of like the stuff we do once. That's just kind of summarizing what we've written.
Right.
Yep.
And next,
So I'm fine with that. But I'd sort of after that, I'd like to get this to the council and to the mayor in the fall.
yes, I agree.
Yep.
Jim has his hand up.
Go ahead, Jim.
Thank you, Paul, and you too, Tom, for noticing. I just, because I'm going to be asked to report back to the planning board on progress, and you just brought up a great point. Something I was curious about was sort of your overall timeline. I'd like to open by saying, I think from what I've seen and what you're talking about, your work is incredible, and I was spot on, you're excellent. But how do you envision the presentation of this overall? And what is sort of your overarching vision of the possibility that this may actually occur? What date do you envision that might be?
It's it's
Big
so
question.
crazy, right? Because like we said, before you dropped in, we were talking about this, how right now with all this craziness, we can't tell if that makes this if that way slows this down or accelerates it. Because on one hand, our fiscal situation is, drop in on the budget hearings over the next couple weeks and you'll hear it. It's tenuous right now. On the other hand, we have connectivity is more important than ever, and there's definitely some interest. There's going to be some interest in kickstarting the economy, and that generally means big infrastructure projects. So it's. I think that once this is done, it's going to be then the mayor's job to determine when it's appropriate to devote the resources that we need to really put together a business plan.
You're saying this is advisory only. You present to her, and it's up to her to take the next step.
Yes, right. I mean, yeah, we don't have any bonding powers or anything like that. Okay. But what we do have is the ability to put the time into meeting with other fiber utilities that exist in the area and seeing what their challenges have been and where they've seen success. And
are you going to give her a recommendation for? And this is just a point of curiosity. It's something that I'd like to report back. You're doing this great work. You're going to make this document, which is your advice, and it's all put together, and it's a stepping stone on which she might be able to launch. But is there advice in there for how to implement, put together a team to take that next step?
Well, let me say also, we have taken one important step. I don't know if you are aware of, but one really big thing that we did was having an MLP ballot question in the last municipal election.
Yes.
And so are you familiar with that?
Well, I saw it.
Yeah. So we had to do that, and we had to get voter support to allow the city to create municipal light plant, and that was a big step. And that kind of lets us have the groundwork to explore this further. So we're going to finish our report, and I mean, timeline-wise, like you asked, it's probably a couple years out from things, really getting built, and part of it, like Tom just said, is going to be about funding and when's the right time to move forward on this. And this is going to the mayor. It's also really we're presenting it to the city council. Mm-hmm. And, from there, the wheels of government do turn slow, but they turn consistently and persistently, and we will get there.
One thing, I could say this, if we come out with a report and everyone seems to like what it is, and then let's just say a really, really rosy and probably unrealistic situation where in the fall the state certifies a good deal of free cash and we have money for things like studies and infrastructure projects and stuff like that. Because our budget, usually what we lay out in the budget is sort of the bare minimum that's necessary to keep the lights on in the city and keep everyone paid until, the end of just until the end of the fiscal year. And then if our revenue exceeds that, then that's when people start talking about, oh, well, what if we did this project? What if we did that project? I might go to the mayor and say, hey, that was a cool report that we wrote. Do you think that we could actually hire a consultant to develop a pro forma business plan?
Yes, that's what I had in mind.
There's a good chance that this year we will have very little free cash, and the answer to that will probably be no. But maybe next year, it'll be yes.
And we're not talking about a huge amount of money either. It's really not.
Right.
Yeah.
Am I correct that this report will be public when we release it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
So it might be that we can also get a little media. The Gazette might want to report on the report.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
absolutely. And I can make sure that they know about it.
Oh yeah.
Maybe we can get Easthampton Media on board.
We got a lot of public support. I mean, that ballot question
Sure,
with over 80% support of the public. I mean, yeah.
Right. I mean, yeah, there's a clear political mandate for this to happen. It's just a matter of how.
Mm-hmm.
Anecdotally, I certainly and personally have a great deal of support from this. And I mean, most of the people I talk to, you know, some really heavy pull, you know, people like Tom Peake, you may have heard of him, and many others that I know are really very much in favor and excited by this. So I know that once this report comes out, it's not just going to die on the vine easily. It's going to be pushed.
It will be. And next year's an election year, too. It could even be an issue there if there's attention brought to it.
Ouch, Tom.
The other factor
Coming for me.
I think it works well for you, Tom.
Yeah.
The
All right,
other
cool.
The other thing in our favor right now is that if we were able to bond it now, we would get the lowest interest rates we're going to see for a long time.
Yeah, but there's no way they're going to bond for it until they have some sense of when they're actually going to start seeing revenue.
Right.
Especially because, like, you know, the city right now with the debt exclusion for the school and everything, like, we've got a, I mean, we're in an okay situation compared to most Massachusetts cities, but, like, you know, we've got a good deal of debt for a small city. You know, we got to plan to pay it down, but we got a lot of it, you know, and that's something that people are definitely sensitive to. But, you know, you're right that it's like, well, right, in the middle of a economic crisis is really when you sometimes want to do stuff like this. So,
Right. 0% interest rates are going to be here for a while. So I think the bonding issues are not something we need to worry about.
Is it the goal that this become profitable?
self-sustaining.
Self-sustaining plus.
Right. I mean, you definitely want self-sustaining. You want self-sustaining plus able to build a reserve to, you know, fund.
Have you mapped a timeline almost as if it were, and I know it's asking a lot, this committee's done a lot.
We've actually discussed that, you know, and the two theories, as I recall, were, you know, going to the general fund or just reinvesting it in the operation itself. So,
in terms of a timeline, because you're putting sort of these recommendations of how to proceed, and I think this is really what I'm suggesting is cart before the horse, frankly. But I'll say it anyway. You know, you might look at a business plan. It might say, you know, in 5 years in, we'll begin making profitability. Where the expectation is here and there. Have you put any thought at all to what a timeline might be for this to achieve self-sustaining?
That's a good question.
I did that in my initial financial report, which, you know, the costs and how we can pay this thing off. And I think you talked about it in your initial bonding report, Paul. So there has been discussion here, and I think all this will be incorporated in the final report. It's
funny, Kevin, because I actually just went back this past weekend and I read your initial report from I don't know, quite a time ago. So it's fresh in my mind. And the reason I was doing it is because I was wondering if I would put in bonding or anywhere in this report, if we should put kind of or probably maybe even as an addendum might make more sense, but to put different situations like based on take rate, like if we get a 15% take rate, what does the finances look like? What's the minimum break-even point based on these, you know, basically arbitrary numbers, but just kind of rough estimates of what costs will be. Right. And then what happens if we're at 30% or 50% sign up? And then breaking it down, like what if our average revenue, you know, per address is, you know, $50 or $70, and how that
and maybe mention Westfield and South Hadley's experience, that the response to it is greater than they could have hoped for.
I can tell you that politically on the planning board, and certainly I'm sure Tom will corroborate this, that talking points those little snippets of that kind of information that can be called out in the meetings to push something like that forward are super helpful.
Right. And to some extent, you know, what I've been, I guess where I've sort of been on this is I've been trying to figure out to what extent we want to attempt to basically build the first draft of a business plan. and to what extent we want to just sort of, you know, give context about how these things work and how they're doing in other places. Because, you know, at the end of the day, for us to be able to bond for anything or to have anyone, like a lot of this is we might do a partnership with another community. For any community to want to get into something like that, they're going to want to see a real business plan done by people who are sort of professionals at this, which is definitely going to include all of that. So for me, you know, what I really want to advocate for is for us to have the resources where we can actually do that.
Yeah.
But, you know, I mean, and from what I've heard, doing that is it's not like a massively expensive endeavor.
That sounds like a major point in terms of your recommendation of what the next step for the mayor is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a tricky thing to do because, I mean, it would be based on estimates, but we could show that under so many different circumstances or situations, we could graph it out and say, okay, by this year, we would be, you know, revenue positive, or at these rates, we, you know, if we expected this take. But at the same time, people might look at that and be like, okay, they're promising it will be this price. Or they might, we have to be very careful how we present that. And they'll say, okay, well, they expect to charge this much per month, or they, you know, and it would be very preliminary and kind of based on assumption as well. So it is kind of a cautious line to tread.
Indeed. We need some data to base those kind of assumptions on, which we're not going to have until we probably roll out the first fiberhood. So.
Right. And other cities, James, that we've talked to, they will sell us, yes, this works really well. And be like, well, can we have your numbers? And they're like, nah, well, you know, you can't really do, can we really?
Why do you believe that is? Do you think it's because it's tough to make this work?
I think that the right communities that we've seen have done really well and are very successful. But then other communities that we have seen communities that have failed. And a lot of times it's because they tried to go too big at first. They tried to just, you know, build way too much infrastructure that they didn't really even need.
Also worth mentioning is some cities such as Westfield and South Hadley had existing MLPs and a lot of infrastructure in place. The closest example to what we're doing is probably Greenfield, and their history has been a little more bumpy. It wasn't quite as easy for them. So,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they're a weird city where they have actually a very similar population to us, but a lot more land.
Yeah,
And
yes, worth mentioning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And their technology is a little different too. But,
Are you suggesting the benefit to that is that we have less infrastructure to lay out because we have less physical space, but because our, you know, population is rather more dense in that space, that's an advantage financially, or poised therefore to do better?
Yep.
Yep.
The density of Easthampton is a strength, and every vendor, shall we say, that we've talked to, they're attracted by that. It would be pretty easy to wire this town.
Yeah.
That's a great talking point right there. That helps me. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think the other thing I think that we've seen too is some cities have tried to price it too cheap on the offset, or they've had these, you know, pricing tiers where it's like you can get real basic level service, you know, for like $35 or something, but it's actually awesome service compared to what you get from cable. So people will just go for that. And then
Have you suggested a rate?
Well, it's, I mean, we took a survey, and what we took is that people really want to hit a $50 price point, but it's hard to say what we could price this at. I mean, my thoughts on it, just personally, I know this isn't the view of the committee, but it may be that we do something where when it's initially available, it might be a little more expensive. And then as we hit subscription targets, the price drops, you know, because then we can
Share the wealth.
Exactly.
I love that.
But
what's the bandwidth you're talking about?
I think the goal would be, I mean, what a lot of communities are currently doing is a gig.
Yep.
Yeah.
Up and down.
Up and down. Which
This is why I love you guys.
And the latency is going to be 0 to 1 millisecond.
Right.
I don't know if that means anything to you, but
I'm a nerd.
Yeah. Okay. Like,
It would be worth, Jamie, looking into that section of the document that talks about the various visits, because Holyoke is helping South Hadley build basically a huge ring network that's going to connect Holyoke with South Hadley, Easthampton. It's actually going to come up 141 and then go from Route 10 up to Northampton and then back over into the Hadley, South Hadley area again.
Brilliant.
So, yeah, this is an interesting, how do you say, improvement in the area, and something that every community should be aware of and possibly plug into at some point. Westfield, I think, is also doing something similar south of us on a smaller scale. So,
Very good. Thank you for taking the time to educate me. I know that must be irritating, and I'm very sorry about that.
No, it's a pleasure having you on the call.
yeah.
Yes. All right, guys. Any new business? Any new business? No. All right. Feel like we've done pretty good for today's meeting. Is there any motion to adjourn?
Before we do that, we should schedule the next meeting.
What else would be good?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Point of order. Would you prefer as chair, as Harry's representative, that I be involve myself in the vote?
That's an interesting question. Were you elected by your committee to serve?
I was nominated to serve in his position. Yes, I was.
Oh, by the planning board? Okay, well then,
Just for one day.
all right, sweet. Then sure, I guess, right?
It's a weird
I'm all right
question,
with
but
I thought I'd ask.
A planning
If
board
the committee
proxy
took a
here.
vote, then
They did.
Yeah, then you're a voting member
that's
for
their
today.
prerogative. Okay, sweet.
All right. Well,
You looking for a motion to adjourn?
So
We-
Monday
next
the
meeting?
6th would
Monday
be the
the
first
6th.
Monday.
All right, so July 6th.
does
Okay.
that count as a holiday?
Is that going to be the 4th of July, Tom?
No.
Huh?
No, it would not be the 4th of July.
Okay.
Ah.
Okay.
So yes, the first Monday is the 6th. I don't have any. That works fine for me.
Yeah.
I think it's all right by me.
Dan gives a
Okay.
thumbs up.
Can I assume that Harry's on your mail list and I won't need to tell him that? You'll email that out? Or do you just,
Yeah, he is on the mailing list. Yep.
and you do email that information to your group?
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, minutes will be going out in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. All right. So we'll have our next meeting on the 6th as
Sounds
typical.
great. I have a motion to adjourn here.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Hi.
All right.
Opposed? All abstained?
All right.
Unanimous. We
Right.
are adjourned. Thank you.
Good to see everybody and talk to everybody.
Good to meet
Yeah,
some of you.
I'm glad you got your tech
Thanks
situation.
for joining.